Good evening and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series that will air throughout the year to support Cleveland Reads. Writers Unplugged is a chance to hear your favorite writers or new to you writers in conversation, as if you were eavesdropping on them in a coffee shop or, in this case, a French cafe. Cleveland Reads is an initiative to improve the literacy levels in our community, and Mayor Bibb has challenged Clevelanders to read 1 million books and or 1 million minutes this year. And the latest update, congratulations, we have read 2.8 million minutes and 126,000 books. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian here at Cleveland Public Library, and one of my favorite things besides reading is talking to writers. It's an opportunity to get to know their craft, what inspires their stories, where they like to write, essentially to get to know them better and see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. I am so lucky to be in conversation with the internationally best-selling author Alka Joshi. I believe you all are going to enjoy this sweeping trilogy that concludes with The Perfumist of Paris, which just published 2 weeks ago. But before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping notes. To find out who else is visiting Writers Unplugged, both virtually and in person, visit clevelandreads.com/unplugged. Maxback's Books on Coventry is our wonderful independent bookstore, and they have copies of Alka's books just waiting for you. You can visit them in person or maxbacks.com. And then take a moment, let us know where you're watching us from, and if you have a question about the story, about the characters, research, let us know, and I'll ask Alka. So first, a brief introduction. Alka Joshi is the internationally best-selling author of the Jaipur trilogy, The Henna Artist, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, and The Perfumist of Paris. Her debut novel, The Henna Artist, immediately became a New York Times bestseller and a Reese Witherspoon pick. It's been translated into 29 languages and is currently in development at Netflix as a TV series. Ms. Joshi was born in India, came to the US with her family at the age of 9. She has a BA from Stanford University and MFA from the California College of Arts. I had the good fortune of meeting Ms. Joshi during the pandemic when my neighborhood book club decided to read The Henna Artist. And on a whim, I emailed her to see would she be interested in joining our Zoom discussion. Seemed like as soon as I hit send, she replied with a yes. She's kind, she's generous. She asked us great questions, and she even was very conversational, spying artwork in the background of our screens to have a great conversation. I've been a fan of hers ever since. And I find myself when I'm reading her books, it's as if I'm taking a trip without having to leave my sofa. She beautifully captures scents, sounds, language, customs, and scenery so vividly, along with her characters. It's really hard not to be sad when the book ends. And I find myself absolutely swept away each time I open one of her books. Alka and I have a similar background. We both wrote commercials. However, while she continued her craft to share her storytelling, I chose to continue my reading craft. So in a sense, our paths did cross, and I'm better for it. So a huge thank you to Alka for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Jennifer. Wow, what a great introduction. And I am so amazed at how many minutes people have already read. You guys are well on your way to meeting the mayor's goal. Amazing.
Absolutely. And your books, I will hold up. This cover is absolutely gorgeous.
Yay.
The Perfumist of Paris, which concludes, sadly, the trilogy. So I thought I'd start a little bit, first of all, to say congratulations, because this is still kind of that book publishing birthday. It's only 2 weeks old. So congratulations on that. And I thought maybe you could kind of tell us a little bit about this book in your own words.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
First of all, I have to say, I never thought I would publish one book, much less 3. So this is a huge surprise to me, as it might be to everybody else. Everybody else says, did you always anticipate writing a trilogy? No, not at all. The second book, the Secret Keeper of Jaipur, came out of the first book, essentially because the character of Malik wanted me to tell his story. And the third book, it didn't come about because Radha was asking me to tell her story, but because I knew readers would wonder, where is Radha in the second book? And I knew at that time, because I developed this timeline in The Henna Artist, that she was going to be in Paris when the second book was taking place. And it was weird for me to shoehorn her into the second book. So I thought, okay, she needs her own story. And in a way, I think that we learn in the Perfumist of Paris from her point of view what
Mhm.
it was like for her to give up that child in
Mhm.
the Henna Artist, what it was like for her to come to Paris, a whole new place, very different from India, and to make a home there with her husband. What it's like for her to raise her children there, how much of her children's education she wants in Paris, and how much of
Mhm.
it she wants in India. Are they going to be the product of both of those cultures? Um, and then I think what happens lastly is this job that she has.
Mhm.
She has found her way into the world of perfume. Why? Because she was so good at mixing the henna paste,
Mhm.
Lakshmi's henna paste, and she could mix it finer and silkier than even Lakshmi could. And Lakshmi was
Mhm.
very, complimentary about that. But um, to transfer that skill to perfumery
Mhm.
is kind of a hop, skip, and a jump for her. She can easily do that. And I thought, what better industry for her to be in, as long as
Mhm.
she's in Paris, the capital of perfume? Why
Yes.
not, be part and parcel of that world? So she's working in a lab. She
Mhm.
really wants to become a master perfumer, and I'll tell you in a little while what it means to become a master perfumer.
Yes.
It's a big task, and she's been given her very first solo assignment. And
Yeah.
the assignment is to create a perfume for the model in one of Edouard Manet's paintings. How
Mhm.
specific can I get? And so she's creating that formula. She thinks she might almost have it, but she's missing something. So she
Mhm.
calls Lakshmi. Lakshmi, down in India,
Mhm.
what do you think I could do to round this out? And Lakshmi says, you have to come down to India,
Mhm.
because the houses of the courtesans, the same ones who taught me the art of henna, are the ones who can teach you how to seduce and entice through scent. They've been doing it their whole lives.
Yes.
And I'll bet you anything that they have the ingredient that you're missing. So Radha comes down to Agra. She meets up with Lakshmi. They go to the house of the courtesans. And
Mhm.
sure enough, she finds the missing ingredient. And it's an actual scent that was
Mhm.
not discovered by Europeans in 1974, which is when the novel takes place.
Yes.
So it is totally different and very unique to India. So she comes back with this scent. Now she knows what she needs for her formula. She
Mhm.
opens the door to the apartment that she and her family live in.
Mhm.
There is Pierre, her husband, sitting on the couch. But next to him is Nikki. Now he is 17 years old, and he is the boy whom she adopted out in the Henna Artist. And he
Mhm.
wants to know who his birth mother is. He wants her to answer some questions.
Mhm.
Um, and so, really, I think that The Perfumist of Paris is about several things. One is the reckoning of something that we did when we were younger that
Mhm.
had an enormous impact on those people around us, but maybe we have not come to terms with it yet.
Yes.
Another theme running through the book is women and their ambitions in
Yes.
the workplace, how they want to get ahead, what they
Mhm.
want to do in their work, but also at the same time, they want to be mothers and they want to have a
Mhm.
home life, a family life, but they cannot devote 100% to any one of those. And they
Right.
end up feeling, I think, a lot of times as if they are falling short.
Mhm.
Are they a good mother if they're
Mhm.
also spending time away from home?
Mhm.
Are they a good mother if they favor one child over another because that
Yes.
child is easier than the other one?
Mhm.
I see women with these conflicts all day long. I have friends with these conflicts. And so I wanted to imbue them in the character of Radha. I wanted to imbue those kinds of conflicts that
Yeah.
women have ongoing every day. And I also want to ask the question that since Radha is experiencing all of this in 1974,
Mhm.
and now we are in 2023, in the intervening 50 years, how much has changed?
It's funny you mentioned that because that was one of the questions that I came up with, that I was struck by several of the themes that you mentioned in the book. And one of those is that, working and being a mom are not mutually exclusive, right? That there's a way to kind of have both and do both well. And yeah, while it might not be 100% one or the other, I still think you can come out and do things very well. But I was struck by that because I'm thinking, wait a second, this is 1974, and here we are. Have we progressed?
Yeah. I mean, we've progressed in the sense that we are used to seeing women in the workplace and
Yes.
we are promoting women in the workplace,
Mhm.
as much as is deemed necessary.
Right.
Um, we still need a lot more female CEOs. We still need a lot more women in our governments, but we have progressed to that point. We're used to seeing women now in
Right.
professional capacities, but
Mhm.
we haven't progressed enough to allow them the flexibility of doing that and managing a home life. There is still a lot of conflict in
Absolutely.
their schedules. It's like, oh, okay, we'll let you work outside the home, but your responsibilities at home are still pretty much the same as they
Yeah,
were.
there's no like divide and conquer kind of approach in some households.
Right.
So it's
And
challenging.
yeah, and, so in Radha's family,
Yes.
uh, Pierre would like for her in 1974, he
Mhm.
would like for her to be at home taking care of their 2 daughters. That's really what he prefers.
Right.
And there's a part of him that also feels that if his wife goes to work, it reflects badly on him
Right.
because, he's able to support the family. He doesn't want people outside the family to think he can't support them. It's a sort of macho, kind of
Mhm.
attitude.
Absolutely.
And I remember my father having a similar attitude.
Okay.
Uh, when dad first graduated with his PhD, he tried to get a job in engineering. There was a glut of engineers. He couldn't find a job. And, my mother thought, I've got these 3 kids and they're
Mhm.
going to be going to college in the next 4 or 5 years. We need to save money for them. And, she went to work.
Wow.
She went to work at a factory.
Okay.
She worked with soldering motherboards together
Yeah.
for IBM mainframes and then,
Wow.
doing the same thing for digital watches when those came about.
Yeah.
And, this was right around in the '70s that she did that, and, my father felt very uncomfortable with the fact that
Mhm.
he had a wife who was working outside of the home. He really wanted her to stay at home, but, what choice did they have?
Mhm.
They needed the money to be able to feed us and clothe us and all of that, and everything turned out fine eventually, but
Okay.
I wanted to capture some of that discomfort that my father felt in Pierre.
Absolutely. And the thing that struck me about Pierre is that the children, their daughters are older, so they're in school. So like, why can't she work while they're in school, and still be able to make sure that, laundry's done and, their
Yeah,
groceries and, some of the signed permission slips and all that other fun stuff. But, it's like suspending that during the time that they're in school just kind of seemed a little bit
yeah,
silly.
yeah.
And then that she has this aptitude. The whole thing was an education for me. And we're talking with Alka Joshi, the international best-selling author. This is the Perfumist in Paris, is how you go about creating a scent. I mean, just all the different factors that are involved
Mhm.
to layer them with the right amount so that one doesn't overpower the other. Or, I've painted before, right? So, certain colors you don't mix together because it just dulls them.
Mm.
But it's completely different with scents, and I don't even begin to understand that process. So, but
Oh,
you captured it beautifully with the little like pipette organ, at their workstations. And
isn't that funny that they are called organs? Because they look
yes,
like organs. There's
yeah,
hundreds of little vials and all of these different tiers, and sure enough, it looks like one of those organs you see in
yeah.
churches. Um, I actually had the fortune of going to Versailles, where there is a perfume museum, and it
Wow.
contains Jean Patou's, organ, and Jean Patou was a master perfumer,
Yes.
many, many, many years ago, and so his little perfume organ sits there as, an education for a lot of young perfumers. But here's what I found out.
Mhm.
I had to go to, okay, so from the very beginning, what happened is that I was talking to the producer of the Henna Artist TV series that's in development.
Yay.
And I said, Michael, I need to find out about perfume. He said, oh, you need to go talk to my friend Anne Gottlieb. She lives in New York City, and she is behind some of the most well-known perfumes like J'adore and CK1. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so she does a lot of work for Dior and Calvin Klein.
Okay.
And so she said, well, why don't you come to New York City and meet with me? So I did. I flew to New York City, met with her, went to her atelier where we, talked a lot about what it takes to become a perfumer. And then she had me at lunch with another master perfumer. And then she arranged for me to go inside a big perfume lab where,
Wow.
yeah. And now the assistants no longer have an organ. Now they have, an entire cubicle devoted just to their scents that they're working with.
Okay.
So I got a chance to see how Radha would have worked in a
Yeah.
lab. And then the master perfumers I met there said, you need to now go to Paris and talk to some perfumers we know there. So I flew to Paris. I talked to these master perfumers, very generous, very kind with all of their information. And then they said, you need to go to Grasse because that is where perfume is formulated and bottled.
Okay.
Compounded, like from the small scent that they created to
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. How do you make sure that you replicate something that is super small?
yeah. And there are experts who just do that. And then the people in Grasse said, you need to go to Lisbon and talk to a couple of these other perfumers. One was a boutique perfumer. The other one was this very charming man, about 86 years old. He had been in the perfume industry in Paris in 1974, which is when Radha is there.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah. And so he
You were
was
destined to write this story. Wow.
So, by the way, his name is Yves de Chiry, and his family had been in the perfume industry and owned huge perfumeries for centuries.
Oh, wow.
So he, I met him through one of the other folks that I had talked to about
Mhm.
perfume. And when I first approached him and said, can I pick your brain about the 1970s and perfume? He said, let me see if I like your books. So
And of
he
course, he was hooked
yeah,
like the rest of us.
right, right. So he ordered my 2 books. Then he wrote back to me on email and said, "Okay, I'll talk to you."
Oh,
Um,
wow, that's terrific.
yes. So then he lives in the south of Portugal. He
Yes.
flew to Lisbon to
Yep.
meet with me, and he
Mhm.
spent, he took me to lunch, and we spent 4 or 5 hours talking about perfume. And then when the perfumist was finished the final draft, I sent it to him and I wanted him to, tell me what he thought. He said, Alka, you have learned more in a couple of months about perfume than most people do in 10 years.
Wow. Well, kudos to you because you captured that essence so beautifully. I mean, I had visions of the coats and the lab stations, with Michael on one side of her and the goofball on the other,
Right.
like on his name at the moment, but just and how things are structured and set up. And there's the hierarchy, right? And then what amazed me is her boss, right, of this master perfume house was a chain smoker. So then I'm trying to figure out, like, if you're smoking, how does that impact your ability to?
I've got an answer
Of
for you.
course you do. Yes.
Okay. So, one of the people I learned about, and this is through Eve, right, in
Okay.
Lisbon, he said there were only like 2 or 3 women who broke through the male-dominated world of perfumery.
Mhm.
Most of our perfumes that we know today were developed by men for women. I think that's really interesting. And
Mhm.
so there were a couple of women who were persistent and able to break through because they developed some amazing perfumes, projects that they were given. And so people had to recognize them as master perfumers. One of them was Sophia Grossman, and she was a large woman who chain smoked. And I said, Eve, wouldn't smoking take away from your scent, your ability
Yeah.
to smell? He said, not at all. Apparently not, because she
Wow.
was behind some of the world's, amazing perfumes, best-selling perfumes.
Wow.
So then I thought, okay, that's going to be my model for Radha's boss, because I
Yeah.
wanted Radha to have a boss who would be sympathetic to her and want her to do well in this world.
Yes. Yeah.
Radha needs a female mentor in order to get further ahead. not just because she's a woman, but she's a woman of color in
Yes.
1970s Paris.
Yes. And I thought you did a great job with her because yes, she was her mentor, but she wasn't like super soft on her. She challenged her in a way where you know, just what was that expression? What did that mean? Like, should I set this down, the tray down on her desk when I'm presenting her with samples? And it was so wonderfully done that you captured the complexities of being a human being, that we're, you know, not all good, not all bad. We want to see people succeed. And
Right.
sometimes we make things a little difficult
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, and also, Jennifer, I think I wanted to capture, like, my life as a young working woman and having mentors,
Mhm.
you know, female mentors. They had to be tough. They had to be really
Yes.
tough in order to break through. I don't think we have to be quite as tough anymore. We just have to be resilient. Um,
Mhm.
but I loved the character of Delphine, and
Yes.
I liked how, uh, tough she was on everybody in her lab. And then, you know, we find out that she really has the measure of everybody in the lab, whether she lets on or not.
That's the other thing too, like, she could be a fabulous poker player because she doesn't let on what she knows, and yet she knows every single little nuance, you know, to get the best out of them and to, you know, improve the dynamics.
Yeah.
Here's a question, and I'm talking, you know, with best-selling writer Alka Joshi, The Perfumist of Paris. It's 2 weeks old. Oh, look at you, got you. Yeah. Perfect. But how common is it to develop a scent based off of a painting? Like, where do people typically get their inspirations as a master perfume?
You know, they get them from all kinds of places. But I think it depends on the project that you are given. You may be given a project where, let's say, Dior comes to you. And by the way,
Mhm,
most of these places that you think of as having their own labs, they don't
mhm.
have their own labs. Chanel is one of the few uh, perfume brands that actually has their own lab. They don't allow anybody else to make their perfume. But
Okay.
most, you know, CK, Calvin Klein, Dior, Michael Kors, you know,
Yeah.
all of these people, they will hire a perfume company to design their perfume for them. And they may come to them and say, okay, you know what? I think we're looking at the sea. We want something that captures the essence of the foam that comes out of the sea.
Right.
Seriously, these are the kinds of projects that they get. Or, Sarah Jessica Parker
Yes.
will, you know, come to one of these perfume houses and say, "I want my own scent." You know how a lot of
Yes.
actors and actresses and singers, they have their own scent.
Yes.
I want it to capture who I am. I'm very earthy, I'm very sexual, I'm very, brazen with my
Mhm.
opinions, and
Yes.
then they have to capture that in a scent. So, really, it's not that far off for Radha to be designing a scent for a woman in a painting. And
Right.
you can probably, guess, Jennifer, that what I'm
Yes.
really trying to do is to once again talk about forgotten women
Yes.
and how there were so many models in the famous paintings that we
Mhm.
all look at and we all admire, and
Right.
we
But we
don't
don't know them. We
we
only
don't
know
know.
the person whose name is in that bottom corner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, what I found out about Victorine,
Yes.
Meurent, who was the, model in, Manet's painting, is that she was a very poor painter. I mean, she was a good painter, but she was very poor,
Okay.
and in order to make money and feed herself, she had to model, and she modeled for several painters besides
Wow.
Manet. Manet,
Mhm.
on the other hand, came from a wealthy family, as did so many of these impressionist painters of
Mhm.
the time. You know, Renoir and
Mhm.
Monet, you know, they all came from wealthy families. So,
Right.
yeah, they could just sit around and paint all day long.
Right.
Victorine could not. And
No.
yet, she was admitted to the Paris Salon before Manet was, before Manet.
Ooh.
Mhm.
Wow.
And yet, we have forgotten about her. You know,
Yeah.
we have forgotten about her, and yet Manet lives on. And why is that? Like, I always think, why is that?
Well,
Is
yeah,
it
you think about all the people that look at that painting, because of course I had to look it up, you know, because it features so prominently in this book, right? And then for Radha to just sit there and study to try to capture that the nuances of the, you know, the nonverbal body language, right? What does that mean? Or and to kind of intuit her
Mhm.
story,
Mhm.
I thought was amazing. And then it makes me think of all the other people that I've seen in paintings, like now I want to know what their story is.
Yeah, I know.
So
And
that's
so
fascinating.
so then, it was like a natural, so this is where my advertising hat comes in,
Yes.
Jennifer, and I'm sure yours comes in too
Yeah.
every now and then, like in these kind of instances. So then
Right.
I thought, "Oh my god, it would be great to develop a whole series of perfumes that are called Remember, and each
Yes.
one of them is based on a different woman whom we have forgotten." Maybe they're all based on these models
Mhm.
in the, painting world.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that there's a lot of richness there for
A
us to
lot of
capture.
yeah, a lot of stories to be told. Is writing this as similar to you in terms of, your publisher, your editor might say, "Okay, we want a book that kind of has this feel." No, not
No,
even.
not at all. I think I have an amazing publisher and an amazing publishing team.
Yeah.
I have
Okay.
always felt, I think from the very beginning, that this is a partnership, right? This is
Right.
not just me writing novels, sitting in my house. This is me working with them to make sure that we get the best novel out we can, and that we have the ability to, put the word out
Mhm.
as quickly as we can and as widely as we can.
Mhm.
Um, I was recently privy to the conversations that were being had at the Stanford publishing course.
Okay.
So in this, or it was a continuing education course.
Okay.
My friend, who is who's a freelance editor and very well known in the community, she ran this course,
Okay.
and she picks a book for the 2 Saturdays that she teaches it all day long. It's all on Zoom, and she
Ooh,
picked the Henna Artist. So I was in the first hour. I was interviewed for the first hour. Then it was my agent interviewed for the second hour.
okay.
Then it was my editor. Then it was the art director. Then it was the salespeople, and everybody else who's been associated with the book over two
Yeah.
Saturdays. And after my session was done, I was listening in on everybody else's comments. And
Yeah.
one of the things that the marketing people said is that Alka makes our job so easy because she is a partner with us. And I thought,
Wow.
yeah, that's how I feel about them. That's
Right.
exactly how I feel. So they're never telling me you must do this, this, and this. They say
Okay.
it would help if you did this, or
Okay.
what other ideas do you have, for us to move forward? And that was, you know what, that was so rewarding to hear, because I think it's a mutual,
And that's terrific. That's how, like, as a librarian, I look at writers, right? There's this symbiotic relationship, whether it's a librarian or a bookseller, that we become so invested in the book, and then the writer behind the book,
yeah,
you become fiercely loyal, right?
yeah.
Like, I'll never forget when you came and talked about the henna artist, and you were like, at that point, you thought it was roughly going to be like one and done.
Yes.
And I was like, oh God, no, like we have to know what happens, because these characters are imprinted, at least in my heart, like forever. I mean, I will never look at a perfume the same way after having read this book, right?
Oh,
Because I'm thinking, what inspired that? What was the story they were told in order to create that scent? Because I can't articulate. I can just say like, ooh, that smells nice, or you know.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
and I was, very intimidated by perfume before I wrote this book. I didn't know anything about it, and I thought, "Okay, I have to start from scratch." So, here are some cool things that I learned,
yes,
aside from learning that perfumers are chemists,
yes,
and that means they have to have a scientific mind. But the other thing is that they have memorized 3,000 scents in their nose, and that is why they are called Lannais.
okay.
So, and by the way, if you ever meet a perfumer from France, you must not call them the nose. They do not like that treatment.
Yeah, no,
Lannais.
I don't think that would go over very well, especially in France.
Yeah, and so, they memorize 3,000 cents,
30,000
which
cents.
I know, right? And so you have to have an affinity for it to begin
Right,
with, right?
right,
It's like somebody who is a master chef. They
right.
have to be able to smell a dish, and then they can tell you everything that is in that dish, every single spice. So these people, they have memorized the scents, and now when they develop a formula, they do it in their heads. They don't even have to have the perfume organ in front of them. They don't have to lift a vial and sniff it. They know all those scents in their head. And
Yeah,
so they're able to develop the formula which is, 0.12 grams of this and 0.006 of that. They do it all in their heads. Then they send that formula down to the lab. And then somebody like Radha puts it all together, blends
Okay.
it into a little vial, sends it back to them. And
Yeah.
then they can decide whether that was successful, whether they want to change it a little bit,
Yeah.
or do a whole new kind of addition.
See, I would make the argument that you are the master storyteller, right? Because you have all these characters in your head and you know exactly what you want them to do or what they're telling you to do in order to carry the story forward, right? Like I can't do that. But to be able to put them in combination, because your books are just evocative, where I feel like I'm right there, that it's palpable, that the setting, whether it's India or Paris, almost becomes another character.
Yeah,
So,
and I do think that settings are characters. I think the settings shape us wherever we live, however
mhm,
we, where do we go grocery shopping?
mhm,
Where do we go to mail our letters? Do we know the postmistress? How
mhm,
far is it from our house? These things I think are important.
mhm.
So for the Perfumist of Paris, I booked a thank you, Jennifer. I booked an apartment in Paris of the kind like I had in my mind that they're going to live in an old apartment
Mhm.
because her grandmother bequeathed it to Pierre.
Yes.
So it's the kind with the wood beams
Yes.
going across the ceiling. It's going to have hardwood
Yeah.
floors. It's going to have those tall windows that we
Mhm.
always see in Paris movies,
Yes.
and it's going to have Le Corbusier furniture
Yeah.
because in 1974 that was a really big thing that people would have had, or his
Mhm.
grandmother would have gotten it in the 1960s and left it there. So here I go. I go searching on Airbnb and I find that apartment.
Oh, no way.
Oh my God, I hope it's available for when I want to be there. And it was available and I booked it for 2 weeks. Now,
Okay.
during that 2 weeks, I would write the story, but then I would also leave the apartment. How many floors is it? And that became the apartment for them. How many
Right.
floors down do they go?
Yes.
Where do they go to get their croissants?
Yes.
How far is it to the girls' school?
School.
And which
Right.
direction do they take? Which
Yeah.
metro do they take? So there was so much that is real in the novel from my own experience. It got
Mhm.
transferred there because I want people to be immersed in the reality of these people's lives.
Yeah, so I'm imagining now that there are gonna be several people that read this book and then are gonna go walk those very streets in Paris. Like, okay, this is where their apartment was, and this is roughly where the school was. There'll be a whole like Perfumist of Paris, walking tour, based on
Oh,
that. Wouldn't that be great?
I've already had people say to me, "I have been to Paris many times. I know that section of town,
Mhm.
and I recognize every one of the streets that you mentioned here."
That's awesome. When you were posting from Lisbon, I had been there, and there were several places that you had posted where I was like, "Oh my god, I was there too."
Oh my
Spectacular city. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Lisbon is amazing, and it's a great
Yes.
walkable city too.
It's very walkable, and how would you not wanna walk on the beautiful mosaics, right? Like, just absolutely gorgeous. Let's talk a little bit about, Pierre's grandmother, right? Because we're talking a lot about women, right? And
Yeah.
women who are empowered and, that tension that exists. And so he had a great relationship with his grandmother.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
almost like that's what his wife is like, but yet he doesn't like that in his wife, but it was okay in his grandmother's life.
Isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
Uh-huh. I don't even think he notices the parallels. He does not
Yeah.
see the similarity. But yeah, he married a woman very similar to his grandmother, but not similar to his mother.
No.
And
Mm-mm.
and this I found really interesting. I don't think I planned it this way, but Lakshmi in the Henna Artist
Mhm.
had a very sympathetic mother-in-law, somebody who
Mhm.
nurtured her and taught her things.
Right.
In The Perfumist of Paris, Radha has a little comeuppance because
Mhm.
she does not have a mother-in-law who's supporting her. In fact, she has a very traditional mother-in-law,
Right.
French, does not want her granddaughters to be raised as
Correct.
Indians, but as French people in the Catholic tradition. Um,
Correct. Complete
yeah,
with the food, because she doesn't want them eating Indian food, which, of course, like, you're great 'cause I'm hungry when I read this, you know? Um, but
yeah.
yeah, came down on that. But you had a nice nod on the photos that were in his grandmother's apartment of Beryl Markham, right, in
Oh,
Kenya.
Oh my gosh, you remember all the little details, Jennifer.
Well,
I'm so impressed. I don't
well,
even remember that.
well, I can remember because Paula McLean wrote a book about it's called Circling the Sun, and I was fascinated by Beryl Markham. We know Amelia Earhart, but we never hear, or I had not heard of Beryl Markham until I read Circling the Sun. And so like I'm like, look, worlds are colliding. This is terrific because it's a nod to that independent spirit,
Yeah,
where she was following, her affinity for flying.
right.
Right. And that's what Rod is trying to do, to follow her talent for being able to create
Yeah.
scent.
Did you ever see the, there was a movie about Beryl Markham, West
West of,
West of
yeah.
something, West of Africa. I don't know, but I remember
Yeah.
that then I went ahead and read her autobiography,
Yes.
Beryl Markham's, and I thought, what a remarkable person she
Yeah,
was.
but we don't hear about her. So again, it goes back to your theme of these forgotten women who it takes a writer to kind of help bring them to life, which what you've done with the Victorine, the painting that
Yeah,
Rada's tasked with creating a scent for.
yeah.
So
And I think that is the task of historical fiction. I think the reason that so many of us women have gone into historical fiction as opposed to just, plain fiction, genre
mhm,
fiction, is because it allows us to bring these women to people's consciousness, these women who really existed, who really
right.
did phenomenal things. And I, for my part,
Yeah.
want people to stop thinking that they were unusual women. I want people to understand that women have always done amazing things
Right.
and, buck the trend. And
Right.
it shouldn't be considered an anomaly.
No, I think you're 100% right, and being able to hear these stories now, I think speaks to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully that will become like, yeah, that's just what women do, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm joined in conversation this evening with Alka Joshi, international best-selling author of the Jaipur trilogy. This is the last in the series. Absolutely loved it. The Perfumist of Paris. So another thing that stood out to me in this book, a theme was summed up in reference to wisdom. He who does not climb will not fall either.
Yeah.
That just was one of those like statements that you're reading, and I was like, wait, stop. I mean, just if you don't take risks, you don't know. And Pierre's taking risks in his careers. He's continuing to advance as an architect.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless you fall, sometimes you won't know how far you can go. Right.
Mhm.
And I think that is sort of a saying for all of us.
Mhm.
I didn't know when I first entered the advertising world whether I would succeed or not, right?
Right.
I didn't know when I first started writing the Henna Artist whether it would succeed or not. And but we have to try. We
Ab-
all have to try.
Absolutely. What made you decide to try? Was there a certain moment, a certain conversation where you were like, that's it, I'm just going to do it?
Well, I think it all had to do with that 2008 recession.
Okay.
When the recession came, my business went down. My advertising and
Yeah.
marketing clients said, "Oh, you know what? We're going to have huge layoffs. We're not going to be able to, continue with that contract." And I just thought, okay, well, now what am I going to do with my life? And I am somebody who likes to stay busy. I really do.
Mhm.
And I love taking classes.
Yes.
So when my husband said, "Why don't you try, your hand at writing?" Um, he'd been saying that for 16 years, and I hadn't listened to him.
Yeah.
So I
We
finally,
won't say he's right, but
right.
very encouraging spirit.
Yeah,
That's
very
awesome.
encouraging.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I listened to him, and then I enrolled in a 2-year program, which was perfect for me because I like short bursts of learning.
Okay.
And I thought 2 years, I can handle that, and I like intense learning.
Okay.
So, it was perfect for me. I had 4 semesters. I had great instructors. I cherry picked my classes, so I would only work with the best.
Good for
And
you.
well, it's something that I've always done. I think that some people look at the prerequisites when they look for classes and they go,
Mhm.
"Oh, I don't have those prerequisites, so I can't take that class." Well, I'm one of those people who always goes I go to the first class, I go talk to the instructor, and I say, "Hey, I really wanna study with you," and they always sign off. They will always sign off.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so I cherry picked my classes, and I made one of the instructors my mentor. And
Wow.
yeah, because her book had been about 17th century Iran. It's a beautiful book called The Blood of Flowers.
Okay.
And it's about a rug weaver. And it's so, I was so captivated by it. I read it a couple of times. And I said, Anita, um, if your agent liked
Oh,
your
I
book,
just figured it out. Yep.
yeah, if your agent liked your book, maybe she would like my book too. And would you
Wow.
send it to her? And she did. And
Wow.
that started the whole thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrific. I would say, as somebody who worked in advertising, that, when you're writing, you're essentially telling little stories, micro stories, right? Because you want to resonate, emotionally with somebody, to compel them to act, right? To buy, to subscribe, whatever, the cause is.
Yeah,
And I can remember writing commercials in their 60 seconds, so roughly 120 words.
right.
How hard it is to write short. And we used to always say, like, if I had more time, it would have been, shorter, because that it is such a delicate craft. So
Yeah,
the fact that you weren't constrained by, like, numbers of words, and
yeah.
just could, create this sweeping epic of a story, absolutely love it. I'm so glad that you took those classes.
I never, ever, ever would have thought that I would be able to tell stories in such a long format. And what a relief it is, Jennifer.
Yes, it's
You know,
exactly right.
when you can, instead of that 1 minute, when you can expand it out over
Right.
400 pages, it's such a relief because there's so much you have to cut out of a commercial.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there stuff that you cut out of the Perfumist of Paris that you wish would have stayed in, or some interesting nugget that didn't quite make it in all
I did,
your
yeah,
extensive research?
yeah, I did have scenes that got cut out that I
Okay.
just thought, okay, those are extemporaneous. I don't really think those are extras, and I
Okay.
don't really need them in there. Like I had a couple more scenes of Mathilde, her best
Okay.
friend.
Yes.
Uh, And I had a couple more scenes with Florence, which I don't think we needed because I could compress it
Mhm.
to other scenes.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things I want to make sure people understand is, Pierre's not a bad guy. And I don't think
No.
that men in that position are bad. They're
Mm-mm.
just not used to having wives who want to work outside the home, and they don't really understand what that means.
I think everything is context and perspective and where you're coming from. So it wouldn't seem, you know, um, it would seem unusual for him to have a wife that would like to work.
Yeah.
Right. And I will argue too that his mother, so Radha's mother-in-law, is not so bad either.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just how we are, I think, as human beings. I mean, there's these things, and I think that's the gift of writing a book, is allowing us to see inside. It's not just the who did what, but why that person did that,
Mhm.
which is something that no other art form can really quite capture as well as the
Yeah.
story.
Radha has a big decision to make at the end of the book, right?
Yes.
And I struggled with that. I struggled with what she would actually be most comfortable with.
Hmm.
And I wrote it one way, and then I wrote it another way.
And how did you decide? No spoilers, obviously, but how did you decide?
Um,
Did one just sit with you a little bit better? Is it more of a visceral, or
yeah, I think one sat with me better, but I also wanted one that felt real, one that
Mhm,
felt like a real ending.
mhm,
Um, I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of just you know the formulaic Hollywood story.
mhm,
So I think lives are complicated. I think all of our lives are complicated. I
mhm,
think that we are all good, bad, and ugly.
mhm,
And I like for my characters to feel like real people who have
mhm.
all of those in them. Um, and so I like complicated lives of my characters. I
I
like for them to have that.
I think you did really well. A lot of times your writing reminds me of Ann Tyler, because
Oh, I love Ian Tyler.
because it's not, everything is not always nice and neat. It's indicative of human life, right? And there's some times where there's certain books that we read because we want that nice, neat Hollywood ending, just based on whatever's happening in our life, right? Sometimes you need that predictability. And then there are other times where I'm like, no, I want to read about real people, that what they're going through is not that dissimilar from an experience I might have.
Yeah.
Right. Now, granted, these take place in two different continents, but you can understand the choices and that universality that resonates with us as readers.
Yeah.
I think you've done a fabulous job with that.
Oh gosh, I cannot believe you're comparing me to Ann Tyler. She's such a goddess.
Well, I would say you are too. I mean, you've done incredibly well. I'm sure there are people that are wondering. Lori Owen says thank you for this, and Cleveland Reads, and thank you to Alka Joshi. So I'm going to say that. What is your writing process like? I know, we know how well you research. Traveling to the places and walking and seeing the very same apartment. What is your writing? A couple hours a day, or do you set word limits? How does that?
No, I think a lot in my head.
Okay.
I'm kind of like those master perfumers where
Yes.
I'm in my head and I'm
Uh-huh.
developing scenes in my head and the characters are moving in my head and I want them to go maybe in this direction. So then I, think about a scene there.
Okay.
And I don't write everything down until I'm sort of ready to do it.
Okay.
It's a very different process, I think, than most authors have. They like to write a certain number of pages a day or a certain number of hours a day. And I just can't be that disciplined. I'm not that disciplined.
It is a pretty disciplined, if that's the approach that they're taking. But I love that you live with them. Now that you've finished this trilogy, those characters are still with you. Yes.
Yeah, I think that they'll be with me forever. And so many readers are saying, would you please do another book? And maybe the next book could be about this next generation, right? There's Nikki, there's Malik's
like
kids, there's Radha's kids.
Yeah.
So,
and Malik's kids, and
yeah. So I might end up doing something like that. And then I've had a suggestion that maybe we should talk about Lakshmi's life before she became a henna artist. So that could also be really interesting. But I've already moved on to book number 4. I'm working on that now. And the characters are totally different. And I love them all. It's so amazing to me that these characters just pop up in my head. And it was the same way in advertising. They would just pop up into my head and they would want to be in this particular story. And then somehow I had to shoehorn a product or a service in there. So,
oh, that's terrific.
Yeah. So it's very similar.
Very cool.
I'm in awe of authors who are very disciplined in their writing. And by the way, you were talking about research. I love research. I just love research. I could research day and night.
Yes.
And partly it's because it keeps me from having to write.
It's part of that process that's just still noodling around in your head.
Yeah. And I find so many interesting things, right? Like, like in the Henna Artist, I was researching pocket watches because Samir gives Lakshmi a pocket watch. And I thought, well, what would that look like? And what were those pocket watches in that period? Oh, and then I found out it was erotic pocket watches that people were collecting from the Victorian era. I mean, I must have spent 2-3 days just on pocket watches. And I was in this panel with Kate Quinn, work and everything. And she said, we authors are nerds and we will go down these rabbit holes of research and not want to come out. It is so true. We are so nerdy.
No, you're talking to a librarian who's like, hey, I'll happily research anything you want me to research for you, because it's the same thing. And it's almost like Pinterest before we had Pinterest, right? That the rabbit hole, that one thing leads you to this, which leads you to something else, which leads you to something else. And I think that's the great part of research, is all these things that you didn't know. I know that painting. Once I saw it, I was like, oh, of course, that's what I did not realize, the story behind that woman in that painting.
Yeah.
Which to me is fascinating.
Did I tell you that 1974, the year that I chose, is because that was the first year I went to Paris?
No, you did not share
That
that. That
that was my first trip. I was with my parents, and, we went to the Jeu de Paume Museum, and that's where that painting was.
wow. See, I love how you're able to infuse your life, your experiences. Your mom, right, is essentially a bit of Rada, right, helping to to do something.
Yeah.
Your background of being starting your life in India and then moving to the States, and so you have I don't want to say a clash of cultures. I don't mean it like that, but trying to still maintain and honor
Mhm.
the Indian culture and food and language, which you do so well in this book, and at the same time you know, adapt to some of the new things.
Don't
So,
you feel that, if you're gonna read about India, you have to understand the food?
yes,
You have to talk about I think they're inseparable. You have to talk about both, because I think the
absolutely.
spices of Indian food, that
Yes,
really complex mixture of taste, um, and how it affects your taste buds
yes,
and your feeling about things, in your head, those are such Indian they're such Indian, cells. I mean, that whole idea is so Indian,
yes.
and I never wanna lose that. So I think
No.
any book I write about India is always gonna have food in it.
Well, I know before the henna artist, this was several years ago, but like I prepared one of the recipes that was in the book before we had our book group because I was like, I got to figure this out, because you're right, the spices and then just the very sense of smell, right, that connects us to memories, right? We all know if we were to walk into our parents' house on a Sunday evening, what it smells like. It's probably different for all of us, but
Yes.
that triggers that
Yep.
particular memory,
Yep.
right?
Yes, and
Um,
that's why I think a lot of people, when they encounter something like Lily of the Valley, they think about their grandmother and how she
correct.
always used to wear that perfume.
Right.
Um, or we walk into a house and we, smell a certain smell maybe from the meatloaf, and it takes us right back to 7th grade
Yeah,
when, we were with Patty's family in her kitchen and we were having meatloaf.
absolutely. Yeah, I think you've done a wonderful job with this book. I'm talking to Alka Joshi, yes, international best-selling author, The Perfumist of Paris. As we're wrapping up, because this hour has gone way too fast, I could talk to you for the rest of the evening, and I think people would listen to us, or hopefully listen to us. But want to first of all just say thank you. And then I have a few final questions for you because this is part of Cleveland Reads, right? Where we're trying to have people fall in love with reading again,
Yeah.
right? What is it that is so important to you about literacy?
Aha. Well, I
Mhm,
think that, it was so important for me to be able to escape into different worlds
mhm,
and to find out that I wasn't alone.
mhm,
And I think I was probably like a lot of young readers. We are more introverted. We couldn't really join a lot of the groups because, and I still can't. I still can't. I'm not that person who can immediately feel comfortable in a group. It
mhm,
takes me a while, and, books just help me feel that there are
mhm.
other characters like me who don't fit
Absolutely.
in, who have, a ways to go before they'll, sort of open up to people. And so, I think literacy has a lot to do with, um, feeling like you're still a part of this world, even if your day-to-day life doesn't feel like that.
Oh,
I also think that literacy means that you can experience other worlds without ever having left your house.
mhm.
So when I read Jane Austen, I am in the moors of England.
Right.
When I read Pachinko, I am in Korea. When I read All the Light We Cannot See, I
Oh,
am in France and I am in Germany in that time
yes.
period. So even though I'm
Right.
physically not there, I can get totally lost and feel what the characters are feeling in those places.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we'll go to like the final five questions. What do you miss most about India?
I think I miss the food the most.
Yeah.
The food, okay, and then I also have to say color. I really miss the color, those hot colors of
Oh
the
yeah, when you were describing when they went back to the Cortesans and the dancing and the performance and the the whole entertainment of presenting of food and the different and the bright colors, right? Like it was so descriptive. So it was very well done. Who would you take a road trip with, Rodka or Delphine?
Okay, I have to say Delphine. I have to say Delphine because she's so I would just wanna know how she got to where she is.
Absolutely.
And what does she think about all of those she's so she keeps her feelings close to her
Yes.
chest. I would
Right.
wanna know, what do you really now that we're not in the office anymore, tell me what
Exactly.
you really think about all those
Exactly. Off the record. Yeah. Like Reese Witherspoon. She picked the henna artist. What's she really like off the record? Right. Just as kind and as generous as she appears to be. That's a
Exactly.
huge honor. Your debut novel and a Reese pick. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think she is an amazing person, to
Yes.
give us that opportunity as female authors
Hmm.
to have a platform, her platform, because people love her, millions of
Yes.
people around the world, and
Hmm.
they will listen to what she wants them to listen to, and
Yeah.
if it's the henna artist, then a lot of people will buy it, and that's why I
Absolutely.
think the producers came to me is because they heard Reese Witherspoon was, endorsing it. They go,
Yes.
"Okay, we know
Yeah.
this could be successful because she
Enough
said it's gonna
said.
be
Yeah,
successful."
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What's the best book that you received as a gift?
Ooh,
Ooh.
do I that's interesting. Do I receive books as gifts? I receive a lot of ARCs,
Yes.
for the
I'm sure
advanced
everybody
reader.
wants you to blurb.
Yes. And, okay, there was one that I read that was really interesting. It's called Ashton Hall by
Okay.
Lauren Belfer, and I liked it because it's like the 1800s in England,
Ooh,
very kind of dark,
gothic.
these kind of mill towns,
Yes.
very wet and dark and, there's a
Mhm.
lot of, horses.
Yeah, awesome. Um, given that the parrot plays a role in all of the books, right? We heard, I guess, earlier, you do have a pet, right? You have a dog?
We have a dog.
You have a dog. Okay. And then, have to ask you this, right? Because of the perfume of Paris, do you have a signature scent, or are you in the process of creating one?
No, but, the coolest thing was that one of the, people who helped me, learn about perfume was Paul Austin. Paul was starting his own, perfume company at that
Okay.
time, and it was all the scents were based in India. So he would have a tuberose scent and a jasmine scent and a vetiver and a sandalwood. All of
Yeah.
these scents were the basis of the perfume. And indeed, one of the things I learned about perfume is that most of the ingredients that go into the perfumes we use, or our air fresheners, or wherever it is
Oh,
that we're using a scent, have their origin in India. That's
oh,
what the
wow.
European traders were looking for in the spice route. They were looking for all of
Wow.
the flowers and scents and spices that were
Yes.
going into fragrance. So he's really focused on bringing India back into the
Good.
limelight to do all of that.
Good.
So when the Perfumist of Paris went off to the printer, I said, "Hey, Paul, would you like to collaborate?" And he said, "Yes." So I'll show you what he came up with. Um,
Oh, this
this
is
is the coolest thing. Um, he came up with a set of 7 perfumes,
Oh,
7
no way.
and they
Oh.
made this and they did this sleeve on it, that is for the Perfumist of Paris, and inside are 7 different perfumes that he developed. Um,
Wow.
I know, and so on my book tour, every time I go to a reading and a
Mhm.
signing, they give these to the first 20 people who order a book.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. That was
Yeah.
lovely.
So, gosh, I wish we had more time together. So I just want to say a huge thank you. This has been an episode of Writers Unplugged. Jen Jumba, librarian at Cleveland Public Library, and so thrilled to have been joined this evening by internationally best-selling writer Alka Joshi. So when we spent time talking about her latest book, The Perfumist of Paris, if you haven't read it yet, this is what binge reading is for. So start with The Henna Artist, go to The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, and then finish with The Perfumist of Paris. Guaranteed you will not be disappointed. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank you,
Have
Jennifer.
a good evening, everybody.
Bye.